All right, here we are. We're getting ready for Paul Pantone. It's hard to know what to say at a time like this. You don't know how much joy is in my heart that I can say these words right now. Um, Paul's been a part of my kind of background environment for quite a few years. Um, I noticed back in 1994 he had spoken at Global Sciences, where I was conference photographer. And, you know, it was sort of like I felt like I was growing up with him or something. And when people would come up and say, well, what is it out there that's really working? And his name was always right up at the top of the list with his GEET device. And that's really been his life for a very long time. And anything else about his background sort of fades because this is so important. This is the real thing. And of course, I think most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the story. When I first found out what had happened, I'm going, well, what can I do? And all I could do was really keep myself alive and let other people know about it. But there were an awful lot of people who did an awful lot. And he's with us today because of the net mass of all those people doing all that they did, including John over here, John Fiala and Harvey and George Gabori and many, many others who I don't even know. And of course his brother, Rocky Bartoletta, who's here with us, and his son, David, who is also here with us, who's just been in the Netherlands for the past 2 years. And he, David Pantone, is starting the GEET International Institute in the Netherlands. So this is just an amazing and beautiful time. And let's welcome Paul Pantone back to life.
Elvis is back after 5 years.
Normally I'd move forward immediately and start talking about the GEET and the plans and how anybody can build one, and it's pretty hard to start out even thinking of things like that at this point after what I've gone through, and my heart really wouldn't be into building any more GEETs right now one at a time, because that doesn't help to get it out to mankind. For some of you last week you got to hear me on Coast to Coast, and George Gabori helped to get that together with a few others, and I got the call saying I was going to be on the show for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And once we started talking and George Norrie found out that I was donating the plans so that every person on the planet could build a GEET without having to pay $250 for a set of plans, the websites kind of went down real quick. For some reason, they weren't ready for 1.7 million hits. Right now, I really have no idea how many people around the world have heard the name GEET for the first time. Even though I've been doing this for 30 years, they just heard it for the first time because of that donation. There was some discussion yesterday with Steve and a lot of other people about, now that the plans have been given away, Steve's not going to be selling plans. Wrong. Right now, Steve's getting more calls for plans than ever before, because I'm not offering the open licensing where people can call me for information. I'm doing it the same way I did the small plans. We're giving them away by the millions that anybody can download them, but they don't have that direct access like some of you do. They can't call me up and say, hey, what's the distance here between the rod and the chamber? How long should the rod be? A lot of this you're going to have to figure out yourself, experiment yourself, play with it, test it, improve on it. Make it better than I did. We've had people report that they only got a 30-40% increase in runtime. Yet we've had others that have said, oh, I'm only getting 8 times my mileage. We've heard reports a lot higher than that. The plans up on the internet will show you automotive engines or tractor engines, how to get a 30 to 50% increase. So if all you get is 30%, that's a good start. For those who want more details, Steve is still selling that license. Instead of $250, it's $150. And then if you want to put it on more than one piece of equipment, it'll be $50 per license for each additional vehicle. But if you don't want to pay anything, take the plans, play with it, have fun with it. Go all over the internet. There's people all over the world now building them. See what they're doing. See if you can do it a little different, a little better. That'll be an improvement. But let me know what you did. Send me an email. For those of you who'd followed my site for years, when the Attorney General decided they were going to try to close my doors, they managed to take away GEET.com. They had me in jail for 3 weeks, and John and a few others got me out. Once I got my freedom and went home, I didn't have my website anymore, so I was looking to get a new website. So I typed into the computer, Paul Pantone. I'm the only Paul Pantone I know, so I should be able to get my name. When you typed in paulpantone.com, paulpantone.net, over and over, all these different possibilities, it would come up owned by Utah State Attorney General. Oh, gee, I wonder who got all those sites. It's good to know your taxpayer money is really doing such good service, which is a whole different issue. I finally picked GEET-Pantone, went with that. It was simple. It was one they hadn't bought. And it built a pretty good clientele there, sometimes as high as 250,000 hits in a month. But nothing like we did here in this last month. We're letting that site go to the side now, and right now we're concentrating everything to GEET.NL. It's short, people can remember it. You don't have to write it down, just GEET.NL. My son will be taking over that site hopefully when he gets back into Europe there, so that he can have it set up so that when you go to GEET.NL, it'll be a news story of all the different things. As far as all of the different discoveries we have, for some of you who remember back 15 years, you'll remember some of the older drawings. The auric effect was one of them, but we were originally talking about 15 different discoveries we had. Then it grew to 30, then 60. Then it got up into 90. It's now at 175 discoveries that we found based on GEET. There are 7 fields that we can identify, but we're still calling them unidentified fields of energy because we're not really sure what to call them. We've got a lot more testing to do in the laboratories. That's where I'm going to be. I'm only doing 4 more classes to the public. I'm not, for at least another year, I'm not going out in public to do another presentation like this. Those 4 classes each have 25 seats. That's it. At the end of those 4 classes, I'm going to devote all of my time to looking at all the emails, all the letters, all the pictures I've received from around the world with all of their discoveries or the additions to what I've discovered. We're going to be modifying what's up on the website right now between now and September 15th. So the plans will be much more complete. You'll have the basic length you need, the size you need, the clearance you need, so you won't need to get a hold of me. But it's only going to be a generic version that will get you that 30 to 50%. It isn't going to explain all the science behind it and why it works and what's happening inside. And while it's happening, what other things are happening on the outside. All the science behind it that isn't found in a science book yet is going to help start explaining all the other things you've already seen on stage here for the last couple of days or about to see for the next few days. A lot of the other inventors haven't figured out what these different fields are. They just know they're there. We're charting out new territory in plasma science. Since it's not found in science books, I'm going to be having gatherings at my home. And these gatherings are going to be the greatest minds I can find with electrical energy, earth field energies, health energies, but we're not going to mix them up. We want to bring in all the best of one field at a time, share our notes with each other, and see if we can help each other to get products to the marketplace. During that show the other day on Coast to Coast, 4 inventors got a hold of me immediately and said that they wanted to donate their technology just like I did. I'm trying to coordinate doing it so that maybe we can get each one of them on their own show to do it and do it right. If it's a question of having something that they need to put into plans, we need to help them get those plans drawn up. But trying to get it through the system with GM, Ford, Chrysler, in a government like ours that doesn't want products out there, we need to find the best avenue. And right now, a US-based website can be attacked. GEET.NL isn't. So my son is really helping a lot in that area to put it together. At the same time, his main job when he gets back over there is to put up the website for the GEET International Institute of Europe, the GEET International Institute, which is me here, and our newest edition, which will be GEET of Australia, which hopefully will be opened within 30 days. Taco is here. Stand up. He will be running the GEET Institute in Europe there. He's here for training, and he'll be going home in about 3 weeks to open the school up. Before his plane could land here after we did the show, we had about 15 to 20 people signing up. They're ready to go over there so they can enjoy Holland and the rest of Europe and do some touring and enjoy going to school at the same time. For the last 9 years, if anybody wanted to go to school, they had to come over here. So now, some of you can go over there and enjoy the countryside. David went out of his way, day after day, stayed up all night long working on those YouTube videos that some of you got to see about what was happening to me and how the hospital refused to give me medical attention. And when he embarrassed them along with everybody else that's here in this room, they finally realized they were not going to be able to make this just go away. The only way to make this start to go away was to get me out of Utah. So the judge decided that the only way he could see to release me and be protected from a lawsuit from me was to say I'm incompetent. So he released a totally incompetent man out to the world. But he also said I can't be charged with anything. So, oh well, what can you make of that? During that program the other night, I also said, throughout my life I've heard of women inventors, but I've never met any. I want to know why not. You can't tell me that all the inventors, all the great inventors are men. There's women out there. So I announced that I'd like to start meeting some of them. And up at my booth upstairs, right after my presentation, Eileen, who's here right now, she has a couple of products. I can't see where she's sitting. Oh, she's back there, standing up. But she brought a few of her products. And I started getting all these other calls from women and emails from women saying, hey, I've got inventions too. And one after another, I'm building up a stable of, what do I do with this many women that want to show their products? Well, once the names started coming in, Hollywood producers started calling up. Hey, would you like to do a show just for lady inventors? I think it'd be a hit. So they've asked me now to host a show, and I said I'd be glad to do it. That one will be coming probably in about 4 months by the guests they gave me. First, I have to have all these ladies show me what they have. I have to write a script. Of course, that's going to be Stephen's department, where he's in here too. He's going to be assisting to write that script so that we can put together a show like that. We have different people here that are experts working in different fields so that we can put together a network of help companies. Some of the people in this room, one in particular here up front, was really surprised because, gee, the guy's gone through a mental hospital and all. Is he even going to remember me? And I come out and say, yeah, you've got a dealership. He bought a dealership a long time ago. He's going to be able to go home and open a shop and hire 4 or 5 mechanics and go ahead and start producing product on equipment. I am trying to live up to everything that was promised that I can from before me. There were many times I didn't run GEET. I was out on the road doing tours, doing shows like this, and we had management companies that were hired. And while we were on tour, those companies stole millions of dollars. They didn't have the right to do what they did. The only thing they were supposed to do was sell generators. When orders come in, you build a generator, you ship it out the door. When we came back, we found out all these people had been ripped off. We continued to fill the orders for generators that they didn't fill. But we didn't even know about some of the contracts they'd signed, where they had signed away rights to countries I've never even heard of, or islands I haven't heard of. Right now, I'm trying to undo what everyone before me that said they were helping me was doing. I'm trying to go forward to get this into Europe, where we're not getting the resistance that we got in this country. We want to go into Australia, where the resistance factor is much lower. We have a gentleman here who's going to be a dealer down there. He wants to start putting it on farm equipment. If you go on the internet right now, there are hundreds of people that are in clubs all over France. And some of those people have claimed they've gotten 8 times their mileage. Others say they're only getting a 30–40% increase. In the city of Vité, France, there was a neat article that my son found for me and told me how to find it up there. the city decided to start putting it on some of their equipment. They've got a diesel up there, 82 or 83% less pollution, only a 30% increase in diesel. They're thrilled to death. They weren't shooting for 100% improvement. They just wanted to see an improvement and less pollution. So we're trying to get out the technology to as much mankind as we can, as fast as we can. The best place for me right now is to be in my shop testing, finding out exactly how long does that rod need to be for every kind of fuel we can test. Is there an optimum dish size on it? Is there an optimum point size? Why does it have a magnetic field, an aura, which you can see here? The aura around the rod is a healthy aura. Well, that's pretty interesting. But what's more interesting is when you hold this up with a compass and the needle points north is up here and south is down here. You turn the rod over like this and you check it with a compass and you got north up here and south down here. Well, you flip it over all you want, it's still going to have the same readings. But what's fun is you hand that same rod made out of glass or Lexan, plastic, and it's got a magnetic field. Hand that to a scientist. Ask somebody who's a physicist, how often do you see magnetic fields like this on glass or plastic? They've never seen it. Leave them with the compass and that rod, they'll be entertained all day long. They really will be. It's cheaper though with the plastic ones because when they drop that rod after they see something, it's broken. Let me have that other picture. This side. One of the problems we've had over the last 30 years was people don't have the ability to make their own parts. So for small engines, we're going to be selling component pieces. This will come with little flanges where you drill your own holes, you can adjust it to where you want it, and it slips over this, then you weld it on. It'll also have little slots in it, so if you don't want to weld it, you just want to clamp it at first, you can get it exactly in place where you want it, and you can hook up the fuel going in, the fuel going out, the exhaust coming in, the exhaust going out. Hook everything up so that it fits, then go ahead and do the finish welding. If it's a generator or an engine that we built several of, we'll be having it done like this, so you can buy these components separately. You can build your own intake unit, you can have it run off a bubbler, a carburetor. We'll make these components available through different sources here and in Europe. Right now, we'd be having a hard time trying to get this shipped anywhere in the world because it's made out of pipe. And we've had a few people detained at airports because the airport people think, well, if it looks like a pipe, it's a bomb. We've had people detained for 2 and 3 days trying to transport these in their luggage. So they have to be shipped by ground, no overnight deliveries. But we will be building these out of Chicago, and over in Europe they'll be having their own facilities as well as in Australia. The rods will also be available. We will have them available in glass, cold rolled steel, and a special order if somebody wants to have it made out of something different. We've had all kinds of requests. On the picture right now, one of the discoveries that was made several years ago was by a group of scientists in Florida State, and they said that they'd set up an entire room with detection equipment, and they found electrons were being pulled from 60 feet away. Dr. Hal Fox and a few of his friends came into the picture in Salt Lake, and we were testing movement of electrons both directions, and we found that not only are they being pulled in, there's something being pushed out. But this is a two-dimensional, so it looks like they're just going straight into the rod. They're not. They come in at an angle and swirl around the rod, creating an electrical field. The exhaust coming down from the engine is swirling in one direction. The fuel going in the other direction is swirling the other direction. So while you're getting 3 specific air movements in opposite directions, you're creating 7 different fields of energy. They're all unidentified at this time. Some of you, I don't know how many have used, I used to have them at the shows all the time, a heat gun, a pyrometer. You can just point it down at the reactor rod and point it right at the center, and it tells you what the temperature is. And for the longest time, we thought there was a spike right in the center, right there, on the outside of the metal. One day a scientist in San Francisco at Stanford called up and he said, we've done every test on Earth we can using surface pyrometers, and there's no increase in temperature. Well, this again goes back to, we need to go back to the drawing board and find out why. Why does one piece of equipment say it's happening and something else says it doesn't? Well, where our pyrometer, which is handheld and shoots out a beam that comes back, where it is reading the surface based on the amount of return, the energy from this light is being pulled in. So it's not giving us an accurate return. We didn't know that. We have so much to learn about it that once we got to the point there's 175 discoveries, we realized we haven't even hit the tip of this iceberg. How many more discoveries are there? So studying everybody else's technology at this point will help to advance them as well as ourselves. We're going to be able to put together books of knowledge. We're going to be able to start proving Faraday and Maxwell and everybody else who had theories but couldn't prove them. Well, there was one gentleman in Florida years ago. I had the paper. It disappeared off my desk about 8 years ago. And he had a white hole theory at A&M University. When he made that presentation, he was laughed off the university campus. But if you read the description of what he called a white hole, what he was describing was a phenomenon that occurs right here at the end of that rod, at the end of the cup, a ball of pure white light that is created in a vacuum, normally found in space. Well, that's space. That's deep space. When you're pulling that vacuum in there and everything coming through it and up to it has been atomically ripped apart, a particle of sulfur no longer has the atomic weight of 32. It becomes 32 particles of hydrogen, highly charged. They no longer explode, they implode. The engine, instead of having heat during the explosion, it has cooling during the implosion. The problem with that was, as I toured this country, we got up to Lansing, Michigan. It was ice that night. Came out to the Suburban and there was about a 1/4 inch ice on the windshield. Started that baby up, no problem. Turned that heater on, went ahead and loaded the Suburban up with everything we had. Came back out, there was still ice on the window. More ice. The heater was working like an air conditioner and doing a really good job. There was no heat to the engine. If it hadn't been for the antifreeze in it, everything I think would have probably frozen up. But the engine was ice cold. So we had to go out and frantically look for electric heaters out of campers that we could hook up to the light switches and everything else under the dash that had wires, and we hooked them up and sat there with electric heaters. We had an extension cord from the hotel run out for a hairdryer. It was the only way we could defrost the window so we could leave town. GEET has its drawbacks. It really does. I mean, if you're cold and you want to turn the heater on, you don't want to have a GEET under the hood getting better than 3 or 4 times your mileage because you're not going to have any heat. Now, that could be a benefit if you're on the equator, in Kuwait or somewhere, you want some cold. But when you get up into cold area, you want some heat. So there are some drawbacks to GEET. There aren't many, but there are some. I've spent 30 years of my life working on this, trying to get this out to mankind, and some of the obstructions I've hit were phenomenal. You got Greenpeace, Sierra Club, Wilderness Club, all these organizations that claim they want to do something for you. And I got a hold of them one after another, and what do they say? We want to empty your wallet. We want donations. We don't want solutions. And if you think about it, a solution puts them out of business. The only way they can make money is if there's a problem. When you solve the problem, they go broke. So they don't want to endorse a product like this or most of the other inventors here. I'm still getting calls at least once a week from other people who've got friends or relatives that have been arrested or harassed. How's the best way to protect them? Well, the best way to protect people, like what I've gone through, is in numbers. And it's not making calls, it's getting on that internet, embarrassing them. It's getting a hold of the right senator that finally will listen. And as we've shown here recently, and use a tape recorder. Protect yourself. Then play it back for them to let them know. Now, before I put this on YouTube, now, do I have this right? They can do a lot more work than they want to do, or do, but they won't do it unless they feel pressured. And you've got to pressure them to make them do their jobs. While I was at that hospital, there was one young man who was beat against the wall by another prisoner. And I asked for help, and we got the FBI to come in, and the local police. They sat out in the lobby, and we sat and talked. And I said, I watched this man beat this man against the wall, and he's dead. Went into a coma, didn't come out. What do you want us to do about it, was their answer. They wouldn't take a report. He was just another convict as far as they were concerned. But what do you want us to do about it? I'm sure that when the right people hear about that complaint, there will be something done, but it's pretty bad when the people you're supposed to trust to support you and represent you don't do it. You're going to find the same thing a lot in the inventions. You've got to look around a lot to find one person that's real, or two, and then grab onto them. We want to help all the inventors we can get to the point of success. I don't know, in almost 20 years of coming to these shows, there's only a handful of inventors who've ever been successful that I've known. When you look at Stan Myers and Eugene Malov and a lot of them, they're dead. The state of Utah thought I was going to collapse. They were positive. All they wanted from me at first was just sign the patent over to them, and I'd eventually get free. You've got to have the strength to stand up to them and laugh at them and say, I'm not for sale. And I think right now there's a bunch of those people really laughing because I said I'd give it away before I turn it over to the state of Utah. So last week felt really good when I said, we're giving the plans away on the internet. Enjoy, have a ball. The morning after that radio show, I was asked, what are you going to do now to top that one? I mean, 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, you gave the little plans away. Now you give the big plans away. Well, there's a lot more knowledge. And as we feel it's the right time, my son and I have already talked about it, we plan on surprising people a lot. There's a lot of things that we'd like to get out there to mankind to make sure you get your hands on it. And we know we can't go through the normal media. You know you're not going to get it on your next car. So it's going to be teamwork and effort from everybody in here who already is licensed or wants to be licensed to make sure that everybody in your neighborhood knows about the technology and how to make it work. Give us the help we need so that we can get more product out to you faster. I don't know where to go from here. I didn't bring in props. I didn't bring in everything else. So let's do some questions. Does anybody have any questions right now?
We're in state of shock.
Same response I remember hearing last time you asked that question.
Actually, if you wanted to go somewhere else, we do happen to have some slides, all of the clearance slides. If you want, I can put them up there. If you want to take a few questions while I put those up, you could do that. Dennis, you want to take care of the mic?
We'll go ahead and go through all the slides on the technology. And these are as of 4 years ago. These are not the new ones. Do you have them all down there? Do you already have them all?
I may have them electronically.
Okay, we'll give you a sec to see if you got that. Okay.
Just might.
And
Hello.
my brother Rocky, for 44 years I waited to see him. Stand up. Come on. It took a lot to get us all together here. My oldest boy was supposed to be here, but he was told by the Army he had to get his lungs checked because some of the guys in his unit came down with something from possible germ warfare over in Iraq. So he couldn't be with us today. He's in the hospital for checkup. Your question?
Hello, Paul. My name's Charlie Rogers. Met you on the phone last seminar, and we got cut off because the cell phone kept turning off, if you remember that. I have since built one of the systems for my car. I have about a 40% increase, and I did have some problems with it. I don't know if you're ready to answer any of those questions, but one question in particular, in the gasifier, I put in stainless steel wool, quite a bit of it,
Yep.
and it got all clogged up from the heat from the motor, from whatever. The gasoline had a tendency to carbonize all over that.
Okay. I'm going to answer that question. For many years, we couldn't get on television. I couldn't get a TV crew to come down here because we were being too serious about reducing emissions and better mileage. But the minute I loosened up and we're pouring in pickle juice, Mountain Dew, Fun Fuel, they'd come out and they'd all say, look at the crazy inventor. But it got the cameras down here and it brought more people into our shows. So I allowed it. Now I'm taking it a lot more serious. I'm not looking at the humor side. If you're using a bubbler, that means you're trying to entertain somebody. Or you're using a fuel that has metal, dirt, something in it that you don't want to pollute the system. You want to use a carburetor. A small lawnmower carburetor does great, or an injector. You don't want to use a bubbler. Bubblers are not for automotive use. We've allowed that knowledge to be out there. I haven't corrected it. I should have. And right now, we want cars to get better than 30 or 40% increase. Get a small lawnmower carburetor, depending on the size of your engine. If you're running a 327 or smaller, an 8-horse carburetor will do it. If you're running anything bigger than that, get a 12 to 14 horsepower engine carburetor. That'll do it. And it won't clog up on you if you're using clean fuel.
Will the GEET clog eventually? Will you have to clean it out ever?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Will the tube clog ever?
No. No, we have never had, using carburetors and injectors, they do not plug up. Using a bubbler, occasionally the bubble will get up to the top of the jar and get into the line and will start building up on the rod. You have to take it out and clean the rod once in a while. But don't use a bubbler. If you're trying to get rid of waste product, you could do that just to leave the solids in the bottom. But when it comes to using fuel, stick with a carburetor or an injector. Next person.
Hey, Paul. For those of us, well, maybe not too many of us out here, but that don't know a lot about this technology, could you go into a little bit about how it works and what it is and everything?
We're going to be showing these videos here in just a few seconds, the slides. We're going to walk through the whole thing. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, Mark Greathead from Sydney, Australia. I'd be very interested to hook up with your representative distributor down there sometime, if he'd like to make himself known. But I really wanted to just ask if you had any contact or know of Judge David Wynn Miller.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's good, because perhaps some of the other people here don't, but we have a little bit to do with him, and he's involved in assisting some of the indigenous sovereignty movements throughout the world, including in Australia. And some of the people here may or may not know, but he was responsible for inventing truth in language, which resulted in the setting up of the Global Criminal Court. And he's done a lot of useful work with helping people stand up for their rights, in my experience. Yeah. Have you had some contact with him?
I'd asked for his help, and I got a flat send your money in.
Oh, really?
And, that was it.
Oh, that's interesting. But we've had a different experience, and
I'm glad
maybe
you had a favorable experience. He could have saved me 3.5 years of my life behind bars.
Really?
It was all cash. If you want to buy my book or buy my tapes and learn it. I said, well, let's see. I'm going to court in 48 hours, and I don't think I'm going to walk out the door. I don't have time to buy your book. Can you help me? And he said, no.
Oh.
So.
Well, that surprises me. I've found
I didn't
very
have
much the
enough
opposite.
warning.
Okay. Anyway, for those of you that have a bit more than 48 hours, you might want to check him out, because we've found him to be very generous in giving of his time, and he's travelled all over the world, and maybe he had a single focus or something. I don't know. But anyway.
Okay. Back.
Cheers.
Any other questions on GEET? Have you found it? No.
You know what? I haven't found it So I had to dig out the backup drive. Actually, we could put the slides on, we just put those and go right through them.
Okay,
Good.
if you want to start right there.
We'll do that. You want to start right there?
Go ahead.
My name is Woody Young. The cost of this unit, the cost of the unit, and how much it costs to apply the unit. In other words, it's just, you don't just go out to one of these fancy cars that have, the full complement of engine in it, and just, put something like that on.
It is much less expensive to put it on a tractor or an older car with a carburetor than it is anything with the new equipment. You have to know your computers, you have to understand all their controls. There are a lot of difficulties with the newer vehicles that you have to have an oxygen sensor bypass, because the oxygen sensor, the minute you start using this and you're getting more oxygen out the tailpipe than there is in the air you're breathing, it says, hey, we got a problem, start pumping more gas in. So the system will start fighting itself. On some of the vehicles that we retrofit, we got the pollution level down to zeros, but the problem was the transmission wouldn't engage, the lights wouldn't go on, nothing else would work, because the computer said, if it's not putting out the pollution it's supposed to, you're not moving.
Okay.
Now, pollute or don't move, come on. I mean, it was
So
pretty
you
bad.
can't use it on the new cars? Or?
There are people throughout the world playing with it, testing it right now, trying to figure out ways of bypassing it. This is actually encouraging the government right now to come in with higher prices and more programs to get rid of the old cars, and don't take them to a wrecking yard. Crush them immediately
Yeah.
so they can't be used.
The German government's giving $2,000 euros for old cars over 10 years old. So you can't sell a car for under 2,000 anymore, because it's worth 2,000 now.
Yeah, our government just put in an extra $2 billion on this $4,000, trade-in plan.
Yeah.
This happened. What is the cost, and can you put it on diesels or only gas?
About 95% of all the vehicles in Europe right now are diesels.
So you can do it on
Cars
diesel.
and tractors, yes.
And for big tractors and trailers, which are, can they be put on those easily?
If you go back to the old websites we had up, which you can go to anybody's old website if you want to by going to archive.org, way back machine, punch in the name of the company site you want to see and the date you want to see, and it'll tell you what their website said. Because back in about 2001, we had pictures of a semi I just bought. We were getting ready to retrofit it. Every time I'd retrofit it, come back to work the next day and the parts would be gone. So we kept doing it over and over and over. We finally modified it so it'd run on about 80–85% water and gasoline in a diesel engine. The parts got ripped off of that a few times, so I advertised the truck for sale, and I just sold the truck and said, I'm not interested. Every time we talked to a fleet, J.B. Hunt and other big companies that had 25,000, 30,000 vehicles, they were all interested until they got word that if they put it on one of their vehicles, they're no longer going to have warranties. They won't even change the tire on a truck if you've got a GEET under the hood. They were going to put all the pressure on me they could. When we had our first publication with Steve Ellswick, it was Exotic Research at the time, he showed a picture of our Volkswagen and the reduced emissions. We went back to Volkswagen to buy 100 exhaust pipes. And when we walked in to place the order, they said, I'm sorry, your business isn't welcome. Please leave. We were told we can't sell you parts. When New York City Cab Company called up and said, we've got 12,000 cabs. How soon can you retrofit a Crown Vic? We went down to the dealer, said, we need one of this model and one of this model. The guy was ready to write up a deal. He called back to find out how they were going to pay for it, and they said, credit card, no problem. Then he checked with his manager, and when the manager heard it was for GEET, he said, call the cops right now and tell them to get off the property. If he's still here when the cops get here, have him arrested. He's no longer welcome at any dealership. So if you're trying to market something for new technology in this country to anyone who's got a warranty that's controlled by the big guys, you're not going to get it on that vehicle easily.
Okay.
The politicians talk big, but they're not following through.
I understand that, but back to the question on the diesel trucks. On the diesel trucks, has anybody somewhere that you know of, put it on the diesel, the new, the diesel trucks that are reasonably new, and still been able to get the effect that's
I think
necessary.
the newest one was just before I was arrested, which would put it at about 2004, 2005. Back
Okay.
there, yes, there were still people putting it on trucks.
On
But
truck.
all of those are in Europe.
All those in
The
Europe.
ones that were being built here, they all got scared. They pulled them off their equipment. And when people heard I'd gone to jail, boy, that was it. They pulled it off everything and quit talking about having it.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Hey, Paul, I got a question for you. In some states like California, where I come from, as you know, anything post 1975 vehicle, you got to normally have the, you can't GEET it without violating the smog regulations. Are there methods around that for the younger cars, and is that something you can talk about now, or?
1999, my wife and I went to California in our Suburban. Before we went there, I called Ruth Costa up. She was the director of CARB, and I asked her for her fax number, and I sent her a copy of a letter from the EPA that I have a copy of here with me. And I told her that she had told people they couldn't put my device on their vehicles. I read that one section of the letter and told her it was on her fax machine. According to EPA, no state or agency has the legal right to tell you what you can have or not have on your car. I also informed her that I was taping the conversation, that it would give me great pleasure to have her arrested. I invited her to come down to the Fresno area to where we were demonstrating it so that she could come arrest me and do it right. At that point, she informed me that she could not have me arrested. There is no such law. There are statutes and regulations that they passed, and the people believe they can't do it, so therefore the government's getting away with saying you can't do it. If you go in and your car is too clean, which happened in Utah with me, wouldn't pass a smog test, not enough pollution, they give you a waiver. You may have to go to 2 or 3 offices before you get it. And in your case, it'd be go all the way to Sacramento. City Smog Shop was the one who tested mine there, and they said it doesn't put out enough pollution to pass a smog test, so we're going to give you a waiver. Now the other extreme, which is even funnier, is if your car puts out too much pollution and you can't fix it because it's going to cost more than $300, they'll give you an exemption for that. Go ahead and drive it.
That's great. Thank you.
Hi, Paul. Joel Garvin with New Energy Movement. The comment that you made about how any of the big trucking companies say, look, no way we're going to take a risk on something that may end up violating the warranty, or the warranty no longer is honored. And so they got, all this money at stake in their investment. But if they're looking at the possibility of a big rig that's on the road all the time, $100,000 a year in fuel, and 30% translates to $30,000. Well, I'd given this some thought and had talked to one of the Freightliner big boys about this a couple summers ago. And I said, well, how would you feel if there were insurance that was written that would cover any of the repairs if this type of technology was installed? Well, boy, you see, he got quiet really quickly, because if you look at what the premium could be to an insurance underwriter for $30,000 a year, I mean, my God, that's a big business. I would think some underwriter would be willing to take on pretty quickly.
I've got all the reject letters from all the insurance companies in the United States and Canada.
Is that right?
Not one of them was willing to touch it. The only one willing to touch it was Lloyd's of London. And they wanted 52% of the profit.
Wow.
Good idea, though.
Yep.
My name is Amanda Wallace. My question has to do with the fuel. I've heard a lot of things about anything can be put in it. My question is there a specific thing or aspect of the fuel that you would look for to determine what would be better or more efficient for this reactor?
What is the least expensive item you have available if it's off-road? We're not talking on the road right now. What is the least expensive liquid you have available or solid in abundance? In abundance. Now, water isn't always available in abundance. Used tires isn't always available. Well, different areas have different, there's some areas where there's a lot of tires, so you'd use tires. Some areas where you have coal available, coal can be used to gasify and then run generators and off-road equipment. It's always easier just to use the gas and diesel that you normally would use and just get better mileage. If you'd like to increase that a lot more, then you set it up as a double system, and instead of having one reactor pipe, you have your exhaust split and make two reactor pipes side by side. One is used to vaporize water and turn it into GEET gas or plasma gas, and the other one is used for gasoline or diesel. Then those are blended before they go into the top of the engine, and you can run on up to 80% water, unless it's on a vehicle being used on a road. At this time, the only state in the United States that will allow you to run on the road is Kentucky. And that's only if you pay your 16.8 cents per gallon on the water you're going to use that month. You have to pay it ahead of time. No other state was willing to agree to it. I'd say that's pretty good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Did that answer your question?
Sure did.
Well, you want to go on with the presentation?
Okay. Well, we've already hit that. Sorry. The carbon in used to be, when I was in school, grade school, they used to say carbon in, carbon out, and that was the rule for years. 25 years ago when I sat with scientists saying, no, it's not carbon in, carbon out, there's something else happening here. The carbon is breaking down to other elements, the lighter elements. They couldn't accept that. Not until BYU ran a test. Next one, slide. And the test at BYU in their nuclear lab, we ran the engine 3 days in a row. They had it hooked up to a mass spectrometer, and they concluded that whatever was happening in there was so far beyond their understanding that it isn't found in the science books. Therefore, what I was showing them in theory that I believed was happening was the only explanation they could put a grip on. We'll be getting to that picture in just a second, but right now on this one, what we came up with, these are all out of order right now. The new books we're coming out with 175 new pictures. Everything is in the proper sequential order. But on this one, it shows that as the fuel comes in, it has an atomic weight at 32. At the half point, it's dropped to double in mass, but it is now a new element. It has separated. It's drawing in extra electrons, other energy. We cannot identify it all yet. But every time it goes half the distance from where it is to the end, it splits again and double, and double, and double. So by the time you get to the end, you've got the implosion effect happening instead of an explosion. There are times when that rod is just the right length that you'll have ice form all the way down the exhaust pipe. It's very entertaining. Next one. This was the test that BYU did. We tested the exhaust. We tested it going into the engine after it went through the reaction chamber, and then we tested it right here in the bubbler. Coming out of the bubbler using crude oil with about 80% salt water, we were getting 72 elements, and there was no helium at that point in the vapor. Once it went through the reaction chamber, there were 12 elements, but they found helium. And they said, well, the helium had to come from somewhere because it wasn't in the beginning. When it finally came out the exhaust pipe, and we've got an abundance now of oxygen that wasn't even in the room. We got hydrogen coming out, we've got nitrogen coming out, nice, healthy, clean products coming out, but no hydrocarbon, no carbon monoxide, no carbon dioxide. So after 3 days of testing at their lab, they concluded that they don't know anything about what I'm doing. So it was back to the drawing board. The next one, please. Now this is one of my favorite ones. The new drawing shows it a lot better. As solar flares hit the outer atmosphere, they're pulled into the center of the Earth there. And in the lower hemisphere, they're pulled down to the south and into the South Pole. It is my theory, based on other testing we've done, that our planet does not have a north and a south pole singular. I believe there is a small north and south and a small north and south in the southern hemisphere, making it much easier for a polar or reversal of the polar fields every 25,000 years. It isn't a matter of, as this is moving over to Siberia and moving the south this direction, they don't line up. As the north is moving over here, this south is moving over there in the same direction. So it couldn't be one common north and south pole. We've been talking about this going on 12 years. Now some of the scientists are starting to agree with that could be very possible. In the center of the Earth, is it hollow or is it a ball of magma? Well, if you look at the energy that we're putting out in the smaller version of GEET, we end up with a ball of white light. Now, when you're running the engine at a high speed, where this north end of the rod is, if you turn the lights off at night, you can occasionally see the aurora lights coming off the north end of this outside of the exhaust pipes. It's making more electrons, pulling more electrons through the field than it can use to be healthy. Oh, okay. When the rod is held stationary inside the sleeve, the vapor hits it and the vapor spins around it and goes out the other side. But it is not achieving a full plasma reaction. It is allowing you to expand, it's giving you some expansion, you're getting 30% better mileage. Now, if you look at the free plans we put up 10 years ago, we showed you how to weld 3 tabs on this. That would guarantee that none of those people are going to get more than a 30-40% increase. Take the tabs off, grind them off, cut a new rod, stick it in there, and watch your mileage go up. That rod's got to be able to spin at high speeds. It has to have a lot tighter clearance. We were telling people to have a looser clearance because that would not give you anything dangerous of double, triple, or 4 times your mileage. It would only give you a 30 to 50% increase. Now, some people wouldn't follow those instructions, so they accidentally been too big or intentionally. They'd call up and go, hey, I'm getting 5 times my mileage on this thing. My generator has been running for 108 hours on 1 gallon. Well, it's supposed to use 1 gallon an hour on a 5 kW. What did you do different? What size rod did you use? And normally they would say nice tight 32nd of an inch clearance on both sides of it. And I didn't put the tabs on it. So a few people did figure it out themselves. The others only will do what they're told. But we found that out of all the thousands of emails we got from around the world, there's about 10% that are real thinkers. If Paul figured this out, what happens if I change this or do that? He says you got to use this metal. What happens if I try titanium? What happens if I try this? Everything you can imagine. So far, we've had emailed back to us they've tried. But it has helped us now get up to 175 new discoveries. Now also when you're doing this, the ball of white light at the end will be there only when you're using gasoline or diesel or something at a specific length, and that's all you're running through there. If you try to mix any fuel, you'll lose the plasma completely. Next one. Oh. Okay. Now, this was done in West Valley. We had invited Dr. Andreas Richter and Dr. Grant Wood to come by our house, and we had Dr. Richter there for a whole week. I said, I want you to come in and prove to the world and document it. Does it work or doesn't it work? And why? He spent the week there. I don't know if David remembers all the notes this poor guy had, but after watching it run the first day, I got up at 6 in the morning to come out and get started again, and the entire living room floor was covered with paper. He had drawn up all these theories and principles and things with all the books he brought, and he says, none of it works. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you can't get that engine to run at 10,000 RPM or 12,000 RPM. It's got a maximum capacity of 3,842, blah, 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 blah. You can't run that fast. I said, well, you saw it running yesterday. He said, yeah, but it can't do that. I said, well, the machine said it did. He said, yeah, but it can't. By all known physics, it can't happen. And he can't do this, and he can't do that. And instead of saying what it could do and just putting that in writing, he said, no, there's got to be something more to this. So he had us custom build flywheels that weighed exactly a certain amount, was so thick and this big around, and we had ropes and pulleys and everything else in the garage. It had to be done his way, and we did it. He said, okay, it still is working, it's doing what you say it's going to do, but it can't. So for 5 days I heard, it can't. He finally packed his stuff up and went home. A couple hours after he got home, he called me back and he says, I know what's happening. It's putting out radiation. It's an atomic reactor. And I'm sitting here going, I hope not. I said, well, if I got to shut down my doors, I'd rather do it now than if I have it on 1,000 cars. So how do I test it? And he said, well, get somebody to come by that has a portable x-ray machine that normally does x-ray testing on concrete silos and things for the government. So we called Metchem Laboratories up. And the guy came out, walked in the garage, looked at it, and he said, what do you want me to test? I said, just hold up x-ray film next to the engine and see if you're getting anything. Just, hold the film up there. We just want to see if there's anything coming off it. So he holds the film up, goes in, develops it, comes back out, and he says, it's fully developed. It's been exposed. Maybe it's the film. He does it again, and again, and again. On his 6th try, he's got a little bit extra protection because he wanted to make sure it was working right. He went out and got a great big piece of film, cut it in half, left half of it in the truck, the other half in a big cassette, and he comes out and he sets it down, and he's got these big, heavy lead gloves on, and this lead apron, and a lead shield, and he's like this. Well, he's holding that film up like this. He's afraid of it. And I'm running the engine going, if all the time I've run this, I haven't grown anything extra on me and nothing's fallen off, so this guy's really scared. Goes out and develops it, comes back in and says, there's nothing there. Then he comes in, one more piece of film, because that was black. And he did one more. This time only for 30 seconds, and ran it back out, and it came with this exploded view of a hose clamp. That was a 2-inch hose clamp. I didn't know that it had an emblem at the top with the manufacturer's name on it. Sorry. I then looked at the other film he had done. And holding it up to a bright spotlight, I can see the outline of these 4 fingers on one side. Of course, they're in a lead glove, but I couldn't see the lead. I could see the other finger with fingernail on the other side. Here I could see bones, here I couldn't. So we were doing a soft and hard tissue at the same time. Sorry. After he saw this, he called the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and said, we got a problem. So they came out the next day. Sorry. They came out with these white trucks. David had just gone to school. I hear all these doors close again. I go out front. They're walking around in their spacesuits. They're stretching out yellow and black ribbon. Caution, radiation. They scared the heck out of all my neighbors. I said, do you really have to do this? And they said, yeah, after the call we got last night, we do. Are you the guy with the device in the garage? And I said, yeah. So we went in the garage and we tested it, and they said, it's not alpha, it's not beta, it's not gamma. It's totally safe. It's a radio frequency. It's adjustable, depending on the fuel you're using. You have to break it down by frequency, which is what Nikola Tesla said over 100 years ago. Everything is vibration and frequency. So they left us alone. In the meantime, we did some more testing, and we've got some test results through Hal Fox, Dr. Fox in Salt Lake, that it was able to go through 6 inches of lead. Doesn't affect whatever it is that's happening there, but it goes through 6 inches of lead. At one of the shows, we were telling people that if you have one of the room credit cards, don't get it near the machine when you're running the machine. It'll erase it. And the guy said, well, what about credit cards in your wallet? I said, well, Dr. Wood was at my house one day while I was running it on the test stand, and he heard a car go by, and he turned like this, going, yeah, 440. He liked that car. Once he left my house, his credit cards were no good because his wallet got within a few inches of the field when it was being run. We no longer allow that to happen. We strap down. We make sure when you're mounting this to the engine, you make sure your flanges are good and solid to the engine. Don't use asbestos. Doesn't want to ground. And then you end up having a stronger magnetic field. So it has done some anomalies that we didn't understand the benefits of. Now, this magnetic field that erases credit cards, one gentleman in Denver thought it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen. He sat there talking with me for a while. We were running the engine at the booth, and his wife came by, and she was bored stiff, wanted to go shopping, didn't want to be at a conference. And he said, honey, you know what? I think you're right. Give me a hug. So he takes her purse, and he's holding it right up against the engine, giving her a hug. He says, you know what? Why don't you go shopping, dear? Spend as much as you want. Well, I thought what he did was bad. She left. She comes back a little later, and she's got this gorgeous coat on with nice fur. And he's looking at her going, oh, yeah. Where'd you get that? She said, oh, down at the store. She said, I found this really nice guy. None of my credit cards work, so I went ahead and used a check, and he went ahead and cashed it for me. He called the bank and said, no problem. How much did you spend? She said, oh, $3,000. But the credit cards aren't any good, honey, so we're going to have to get some more cash to go home on. Well, he knew his cards were good, and he didn't want to tell her that he did that on purpose. But everybody at my booth was laughing. We have found different anomaly with the technology. We have had very unusual responses from some agencies, but the biggest thing that surprised me is our great government not caring about better mileage. We had one cute call a few years back, and how much longer do I get here?
Well, Paul, that's a good question. Theoretically, the session would normally be just about done, and I know none of this is interesting to any of you. Actually, we were going to start the NASIM special speaker thing here at between 6 and 6:15. We can go as late as you choose to, because we were, right after the NASIM special, then we were going to do the conference social and eat. We were probably going to get the food around 7. So should we just keep going? All right. Back to you, Paul.
Okay. Next picture. Turn the page. This is a real fun one. We had a gentleman come in, 2 professors from University of Berlin, and when they were at our shop, there was horrible time in communication. They didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any of their language, so it was really a point, and that's the best I could do that day. We didn't have a big whiteboard. They went back and they put it on a VW, and they kept it the same size, the exhaust going around it, and then they called me back, and they were trying to communicate. They had a student helping, and he says, well, there's a problem. There's too much restriction in here. How much should the restriction be around the reactor? Well, I thought he meant between the reactor rod and the inner pipe. He meant between there and the outer pipe. And I told him, well, that should be about a 32nd of an inch. Well, they went ahead and restricted it way down. They called back saying, oh, we got really great mileage now. Extra horsepower, too. The problem we got is the exhaust coming out is under such a vacuum. It was creating a vacuum back here that was intense on the engine, causing an extra power stroke instead of an exhaust stroke. I said, well, I wonder what would happen if you go the other way. Performance went way down. So anybody thinking logically would think that isn't going to work. That's going to back up the engine. Well, I guess I'm illogical at times, because I would have thought that until they called back and said how great it was, and it had extra performance, another 30% increase on top of the other 30% increase, and it was like, never mind, I'm on overload. Next one. Now this one is a 2-part discovery. The first part of it was handed to me back in about 95, and it was about 2001 that the second half got handed to me. What was happening is they were testing using a crystal head that they had received from, I think it was Tecumseh Motors, that is used in testing so they could see what's happening inside the engine. We were having questions thrown at us from Dr. Wood and a lot of other scientists saying, how can you idle a 350 Chevy down to 50 or 80 RPM without it rocking all over the place? It should be knocking, and you can't do that. Yet we were able to idle them way down to 50 and 70, 80 RPM, put a nickel on top of it, and watch the nickel stand. Wouldn't fall over. Put a glass of water on top of an engine, idling at that speed, and it would have ripples from the dead center outward every time there was a stroke. But there was no vibration to the engine. The Cambridge Labs ran their test with this glass head and called us back up and said, well, it isn't exactly exploding like normal fuel at 12 o'clock at the top pushing the piston, or at 3 o'clock pushing the piston sideways. And because of that, you don't need piston rings, and there isn't going to be a need for a lot of rings in the first place because you're not getting any side motion. One of the reasons you're not getting heat to the engine is every single stroke is dead center. But they hadn't looked at the time lapse in the digital equipment they had. It wasn't getting that glow from the dead center at top dead center. It was firing before it got to the top of the engine. It was imploding. We didn't realize that until they called us back years later saying, well, we missed a part. We forgot to coordinate the computer pictures to the stroke of the engine. We were firing on before top dead center, pulling the piston up. The new recombined fuel at that point would then be experiencing a spark, and it was getting a secondary reaction, and the restriction in the exhaust pipe was causing an additional horsepower increase. But it was still letting the engines run cold. Now, one of the generators we used to have, it's sitting somewhere in Utah, is about 6 feet wide, about 13 feet long, and weighed about 16,000 pounds. It's a great big V8 with 7.5-inch pistons. I don't know if any of you saw the old big blue engine we used to have. It's up on the internet, and it's been written up in the magazine a few times. But we ran that for Fox News in Salt Lake. They came out and filmed it, and we had put a dyno on it, or a magneto on it. We had coils for every one of the cylinders. We had spark plugs put in where the injectors used to be. Went through $98,000 worth of remodeling on this engine. And I'd asked my wife's brother to put on new pretty spark plug wires so it looked really good for the TV. Well, he decided to take a lunch break first, so he went to lunch, forgot to put the spark plug wires on. Fox News shows up, we're out there running the thing, and after about 30 minutes, the guy from Fox News says, how hot's the block now? And I checked it. It had gone up 1 degree. The reason it went up 1 degree is the sun had now got on this side of the block and was hitting the blue paint. After the cameraman was all done, puts his camera back in the bag, he says, I got one question for you. I know it's going to sound dumb. He said, I used to be a mechanic, a diesel mechanic, till I hurt my back, and that's why I have to do this for a living now. But why on earth would you go through the trouble of spending all that money to make it with spark plugs and then not even hook up the spark plug wires? And I turned around, I'm looking at the engine, and there's no wires on it. I was dumbfounded. I mean, here we are running it on junk fuel. You got a diesel engine running on crude oil, used engine oil, transmission fluid, soda pop, everything we could throw in it. It ran perfect. No spark plugs. I didn't have a clue as to why it ran, but it was running. Goes all the way back to the very first time I ran the engine for a mechanic. He says, can you explain how this works? I said, yep. You put the fuel in here, you pull that rope, and it runs. And that's about all I knew, other than I put a little rod in the middle of this pipe, and the fuel goes through there, and that's it. If you'd have told me back then I was going to come up with more discoveries than anybody else in science and get written up in science books and magazines, I would have laughed at you. I said, no, I'm a carpenter. This has opened my eyes in a lot of different ways. But to find out that the top dead center doesn't mean anything. On our Suburban that we drove around the country, we had one mechanic. He thought he was going to be cute when we got to Indianapolis. He reached up under the hood there, loosened up the distributor cap, turned it a little bit when I wasn't there. Somebody asked for us for a demo, and I ran out there and jumped in and hit the key, started right up. He says, do you mind if I check this out? And I said, well, go ahead. And he reaches in and he's turning the distributor like this. And it's not changing anything. He said, can you explain that? I said, yeah, it looks like it's loose. I don't know what else you can say. I guess it isn't needed, is it? We don't need a smog pump. You don't need a PCV valve. You don't need a, oh wait, you don't need a radiator either, or the fan. Well, there's a lot of things under the hood you don't need if we could rebuild and start out from scratch with a basic frame, a nice light fiberglass body reinforced so that it could take the impact, and just a little engine. But people are spoiled. They got to have all this remote control stuff. No thanks. Next picture. These were two of the tests that helped me to believe that our planet does not have one axis but two. When we were doing these tests, there was a couple guys working with us in Australia and universities in California, Florida, and in Europe. And we kept getting these simultaneous results that everything was being reversed, that our numbers weren't right. But if you look at the temperature, when you're running this pointed horizontal north, that in the southern hemisphere, 120 degree average temperature at the dead center of north, and down at the other end you got 32 degrees, which is the south pole of the planet. In the northern hemisphere, you've got the equator at 120 degrees and the North Pole at 32 degrees. Well, the only thing that could make sense to me means we've got two different access points on the planet. We're not one. If you were to take two magnets and put them together, you're going to read one south and one north. The energy is transferred. Same thing is happening on our planet. The next picture. This is just a method of being able to use the compass if you're doing R&D, which you're not going to have to do anymore. We're going to tell you how long the rod needs to be for gas, diesel, and kerosene. If you're interested in the scientific aspect, there'll be a special site being put up, and it'll be an educational site, but it'll also be found at GEET NL. We can move on to the next one. My brother and I remember this one very well. When Rocky and I were little and he was about 5 or 6, Mom used to always take hot water, make ice cubes. And we'd both sit there and go, yeah, right, Ma. But she said it made ice cubes faster. We didn't argue. When it came to boiling water, well, got to use the coldest water we can get out of the tap. It's going to boil faster. Yeah, Mom. During some of the tests that we've done, utilizing vacuum technology as well, we found that these temperature differentials do move faster. The molecules become so excited that they will move faster than something that's only 2 degrees away. It moves much slower. So by taking that inertial speed, you can achieve a lot of energy. Next picture. Now again, we're taking this out of the book. It'll be in a whole special department just for people who are running on crude oil, waste oils, and things like that, because no one else in the world really needs to know why a bubbler works or how it works, because it has nothing to do with anything else other than vortexes. How can you pull a vapor off and keep it separated? A bubbler will do that. But is it important to anyone trying to modify a car or a generator? No, it's not. But it did help me keep a few 100,000 people confused. And I didn't mean to. I was just sharing all the knowledge I had at the time, and I wasn't being selective enough. I'm going to be a lot more selective here. Back to the bubbler again. There are many ways to build a bubbler. You can build it with float system, electronic float inside. You can do it with a small lever. Next one. Here we go. Now you can, if you got an air intake, you got a block here with threads on it so you can screw an air filter on it. And then this area here is hollowed out, or even a tube through the center, however you want to do it. And this can be a block on top screwed on so that you can have the whole center open. But you got two injectors that come into the side, or they can come in from opposite sides. And this airflow from here with the injector fuel then goes over to the reactor. That fuel would come into here. Goes through the reactor, comes out this end, it's GEET gas, it's plasma. The exhaust goes the opposite direction and out. This doesn't have to be built out of anything fancy as long as it can hold 2 injectors and have a hole through it. Now for some of you, you got to see on the internet, and I do have pictures that'll be here on display upstairs later today. We built carburetors for a 350 Chevy out of wood, a hollow box. The lucky guy there in Salt Lake, I drove up to his shop. He was across the street from one of the schools we had. Nice cabinet shop. And I pulled in and I said, can you build me a box? And I handed him a gasket from a carburetor. But can you build me a box this big? He said, what do you want it out of? I said, oh, could be fine. He said, yeah. And the other guy in the cabinet shop, well, isn't that a gasket for a carburetor on a 350 Chevy? I said, yeah. And the owner of the store says, just make it. It'll be 60 bucks. I said, no problem. Here you go. I'll have it done for you in an hour or 2. I went back to the shop and I said, is it done? He said, sure. It's right here. I said, would you like to see it on the truck when we mount it? He said, nope. I said, why not? He said, I'm waiting to see where the heck you got the camera hidden. You must think I'm stupid. I mean, candid camera used to be years ago. This has got to be one of those hidden camera things, right? I'm not falling for it. I'm not that dumb. So we went across the street and we threw it on our 350 Chevy on a pickup truck, took the hood off, drove it back over to him, parked it right in front of his window. So if he just looked out, he could see it. I said, would you like to see a 350 Chevy with that wooden box running? Nope. Can't be done. He refused to come out. Well, one of his workers came out, looked at it, and he's smiling ear to ear. He says, I don't believe it. He says, rev that thing up. So we rev it up a few times. And he goes back in and he tells his boss, he says, it is really working. They got that little box on there, and he says, and you're part of this? Did you set him up to do this? I mean, I should fire you. I'm not going to be that dumb. You're not going to get me on TV doing that. We tried for 6 months to get him to look at that, and he refused to. Some people will not accept what they're seeing unless they built it themselves. So now, get on the internet and build your own. Next one. Magnetic Gauss fields. Next one. This, again, we hit earlier, where the electronic beam bounces back and gives us false reading. It is a way of telling that the unit's working, but it's not accurate. It is really not on the outside jumping 500 degrees, but it reads that. Next one. If you want to increase the flow, a few of you have asked yesterday about a turbo. Instead of using a bubbler here, it can be anything else, fuel injector, carburetor. But if you're pulling more vacuum through here using a smog pump that we teach you how to modify, it'll create extra vacuum in here. You then use the belt on the engine, which as you speed the engine up, it goes faster, giving you more pumping power, and that pumps into the engine. Be careful what you wish for. We've had engines that have achieved 3 times their RPM. So if you can redline at 8,000, can you imagine redlining at 24,000? Hold on. Go ahead. Okay. This again is back to the bubbler. Go on. Bubbler again. Move on. Twin exhaust pipes. Dual reactor. One rod can be longer than the other if you're using 2 different fuels and utilizing just one exhaust pipe. You split the exhaust pipe so you have two sides to use. You have 2 different fuel systems here. One can be water, the other can be gas. It can be water and diesel, kerosene, whatever you want to use, but each rod has to be the exact length for the fuel you're using. A water rod will not work for a diesel. It will not work for crude oil. You'll end up not getting zero pollution, and in some cases, you won't get any reduction in pollution if you're using the wrong side rod. Next one. These are some of the other models that people have attempted. If you're going straight through, not a problem. If you've got a broken exhaust, you're going to end up with a cold spot here, cold spot there, and a cold spot there. It'll stop it from functioning. You want to be able to have consistent hot and cold in opposite directions. Next one. We're not going to be going into that. This one will be printed out with much more detail. I think this would be a good place to end the presentation right now because a lot of you are going to want to know those numbers. I've been asked about 20 times in the last 2 days, what length do I make it and what clearance? So for all of you who want to know what's missing on the plans on the internet, it's this information right here. So read it, write it down, draw it out, and memorize it. If there's no other questions, I'm out of here.